Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I am here today to talk about books I would recommend to existential crisis Barbie. So like many of the rest of the world, in the past week or so I have went to see the Barbie movie, which I thought was really good, and also I did go to see Oppenheimer as well, which I also really enjoyed. Both very different movies, but also both very good movies. So yeah, I've had a really good time with the whole Barbieheimer trend on social media, and I just kind of wanted to add to it a little bit by talking about book recommendations for Barbie, but in particular existential crisis Barbie who's having a little bit of a hard time, is thinking about death, doesn't really know kind of life, what to do with life. Yeah, just having a little bit of a crisis and is a little bit down. So yeah, I wanted to recommend some books to her that I think she would like, and to anyone else who is looking for books to uplift you, books to make you think about life, books that would inspire you. These are some books I think that might help. So the first book I want to talk about is a book that I'm recommending because I think when you're going through something that, existential crisis, or just kind of a period where you're just feeling a little bit slumpy, a little bit meh, you don't really know what you want to be doing, sometimes it's very cathartic to have a really good cry. I don't know about anyone else, but I know for myself, sometimes I might be feeling really bad, and then I might have a really good cry, and it's just letting all those emotions out, and then I feel a little bit better. So for that, I wanted to recommend a book that I really love. It's called A Man Called Uve by Frederick Backman, and it's also been turned into a movie that literally made me ugly cry like a baby, I swear to God, called A Man Called Otto. And in this one we are following an old man called Uwe who has recently lost his wife. He is a widower and he's kind of like done with life. He feels like he's been there, done that, and he doesn't want to exist in this world anymore, particularly without his wife. So he has this plan that he is going to take his own life. But on the day that this happens, this new family move across the road from him, and one thing after another kind of crops up, and he has to keep kind of pushing back his plan to kill himself. So we see this happening, and as this starts to happen, Uwe becomes closer to the people across the road. We start kind of learning more about his life in the past with his wife, how they met, how they grew up together and their relationship, and then his relationship with other people on the road as well, some friendships that he's had, as well as some kind of enemies that he's made too, and how that all came about. So we get to really know Uwe. He starts off as this very crotchety old man who's not a very nice person, or at least who we don't think is a very nice person. And then as we get to know him a little bit better, we realise that he has this really good heart underneath it all, and you just need to kind of crack the exterior a little bit to see the real softy that he is inside. And the whole thing is just really heartwarming. There are parts of it that are just very emotional that will make you cry, and the exact same with the movie A Man Called Otto. I do think there is a Swedish version of the movie as well, which I haven't seen. I have seen the more American version of the movie, which I just really enjoyed, and definitely I feel like it's going to be a movie I will turn to, and I feel like I just need a really good cry because it definitely made me cry. But it's one that makes me happy. I'm crying, but I'm also happy, and I feel like really like my heart is warm, and I just feel a little bit like my faith in the world is slightly renewed because it's showing the kindness of ordinary people, and the power that is companionship, that is friendship, that is found family in ways, and even like the companionship of a pet as well, I think is very evident in A Man Called Uwe as well. So it's one I definitely recommend. The book I want to recommend for in terms of having an existential crisis, not knowing what to do, and maybe having a dream that you haven't fulfilled or you don't know how to fulfill. This is a book I'm recommending in terms of the topic of you're never too old to pursue a dream, and for this one I'm going to go for Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce. This is set post World War II, like around the 50s, early 60s maybe, and we are following a character called Miss Benson who is a no-nonsense matronly sort of character, and one day she decides that she is tired of like kind of living a life that she doesn't really want to be doing, and she is finally going to do this one thing that she has been wanting to do since the time she was a child, which is to go and find this kind of elusive beetle in I think it's in South America that she wants to travel to try and find this beetle to prove to the world that it exists. So she puts in an ad to try and find an assistant, and a woman writes back, and the two of them make plans to travel to South America together to try and find this beetle. And when the assistant shows up, she is very much the exact opposite to Miss Benson in many ways, and we see the two of them go on their travels together anyway. Miss Benson at this point doesn't really have any choice. She has to go ahead with her her initial decision to hire this woman, because they're literally like there's no time left to find someone else. Two of them travel together to try and find this beetle, and just the hijinks that ensues are very, very funny, but the friendship that kind of grows between the two of them is really lovely, and I just really, really enjoyed. I just thought like this book just had so much in it. I just love this thing of like, you know, kind of opposites attract in a way, in not necessarily like not a romantic way, but in a friendship way, which I do think also happens a lot in friendships. And yeah, just the joys of female friendship, the joys of pursuing your dream, of not feeling like you're too old or too past it to be doing it, that you're never too old to pursue a dream, and that you can, like, in many ways you can fulfill it. So yeah, this is one I really, really enjoyed and one that made me very happy, and I definitely recommend. A book I want to recommend in terms of just female friendship and female spirit and fighting spirit is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wayne. This is a book that I absolutely love. I've recommended it quite a lot. I've reread it a few times. I just really, really love this book. This is set during World War II, and at the start of the book we are following a diary, and we are learning about this character who, our main character, who was a spy and has is an English spy in France, and she has now been captured by the Nazis in France, and where she was. And we are learning about her story, about what happened, how she was captured by the Nazis, and in her story that she is writing while she is imprisoned, she is telling us about her friendship with this girl who she met during this training, a female pilot in the war, and who was her best friend, and she's telling us about this friendship. And I just absolutely loved the friendship in this book. I think a lot of Elizabeth Wayne's books have this really strong theme of female friendship and just very strong female characters. Just absolutely love this one. I loved the friendship. I loved the kind of mystery. I loved there's like this real tense atmosphere of the book as well, because obviously our main character is imprisoned. Like, her life is on the line at many points, and at around halfway through the book the perspective switches and we're learning the story through a different pair of eyes. It's just a very, very fulfilling book. It is a book that like is a little bit sad at parts as well. Obviously it is set during the war, so you can kind of understand that there's probably like there's loss, there is just scary moments in it because of all of that. But yeah, I just really, really love this one, and I definitely recommend for any Barbie lovers who are looking for female friendship books. Book I want to recommend because in my opinion it is Barbie land existing in real life, and that is Bitch on the Female of the Species by Lucy Cook. And this one is a non-fiction book. It is a book that looks at nature, but in particular the female species within nature. And Lucy is basically like explaining how the attitude towards like Darwinism and people who you know, really follow Darwin, like Charles Darwin and his ideas in the scientific world, are kind of at times a little bit behind, because a lot of Darwin's theories were about like this idea of the male being this aggressive kind of forward, like the gender in nature, and that the female was always passive and kind of, you know, the weaker, the more submissive like gender in nature. And she is saying where there's many instances in nature now that we know of that prove that this theory is incorrect. Times it is the female of the species that is actually a little bit more aggressive, that is the like more of a leader in family packs and stuff like that. And she talks about a bunch of different kind of topics within this sphere of powerful female animals in the world, in the nature world, and what we can learn more about them. And you know, the fact that like some of these facts are kind of not that well known. And in particular, there are some kind of animal groups in nature that are very much led by the female of that species, such as hyenas, lemurs as well. And I'm like, when I was thinking about books to put in this list, I thought about this book, and I was like, oh my god, this book is literally showing us where in the world Barbie land exists in many different ways. And it's just not with humans or like human dolls, it's with animals. Just to finish up with this, I want to just recommend some girl power non-fiction books that I really, really enjoyed. One of these has to be I Am Malala by Malala Yousaf, and this is basically Malala's story about fighting for her right for an education, and then her subsequent the target that ended up being on her back, because she was this kind of figurehead for for female education and for female empowerment, and how she was eventually shot and then driven out of her own country for her own safety, herself and her family. And she's obviously become this really like powerful voice when it comes to female empowerment, when it comes to speaking about issues around just equality in the world and inequality in many places, about for refugees and immigrants. And yeah, she is just a very, very powerful, very inspiring person. This is a book, I think, like it was written, like I think it was partly written by her, partly ghostwritten maybe, and while there's parts of it that are quite simple, I just think the story as a whole still remains very powerful. No matter how simply the actual story is written, it's still a very powerful one. Another one I want to recommend is Hidden Figures, and this is just a brilliant book about the women, particularly the African American women who worked in NASA and at the start of kind of like the space race, and how they were the computers, like literally, like they were so good in terms of science and mathematics, and they were like these real human computers that basically, because of the work that they did, ended up that progress was made in terms of the space race, and that a man eventually did end up on the moon and did making these massive steps towards space exploration. Was a lot of it came down to what these women were doing in their offices, and a lot of the time they were doing it around a time when, you know, in terms of like race relations and like what they could and could not do, where they could and could not go, like etc. They were very, very limited because they did not have all their full rights at the time that they were working in NASA. And it's just a really interesting book. It highlights some really interesting figures of women who worked in NASA and who are definitely inspiring and just incredibly clever. Like you cannot even fathom how smart these women were. And yeah, again, very, very inspiring. And then for UN High Commissioner Barbie, I have to obviously talk about my fave, Mary Robinson, and her memoir, Everybody Matters. Mary Robinson was the first president of Ireland, and she had just a very interesting life in terms of her decision to become a solicitor and then becoming a senator and eventually the president of Ireland. And then afterwards she went on to become the UN High Commissioner, and she has always kind of spoken up in terms of again, inequality going around the world, thinking about economic and social rights. She has done work in and kind of like campaigned for just awareness of things going on, particularly in Africa when it comes to healthcare and like women's rights in different countries in Africa. And she is just very, very inspiring, and she's always, throughout her career, she has always kind of spoken on behalf of women who weren't being heard, and she gave them a platform. And I just always really appreciate that in her book when I was reading it. And yeah, I just find her a very inspiring person. And she also in her later years has become a real advocate in terms of climate change and again, making people aware of what climate change is doing to the country, and reducing plastics and trying to just do the best we can in terms of being green and being more aware of what is going on and being more sustainable. So yeah, she is very, very inspiring. So I had to talk about her because she is definitely she should definitely be some kind of Barbie. So UN High Commissioner Barbie, President of Ireland Barbie, I don't know. And then another book I want to talk about is another real hero of mine, and that is The Book of Hope by Jane Goodall. I read this book last year, and it is definitely one of the most powerful, most affirming, hopeful books I've read. Obviously it's called The Book of Hope, and this is just about Jane Goodall and her message in terms of the future of the world. She talks about her own experience growing up and her eventual kind of career, like how it started from her being this pioneer when it came to research and studies on chimpanzees, and then it led into her campaigning for environmental awareness, conservation for chimpanzees and other creatures, other animals in the world who very badly needed someone to speak on their behalf, which she has done. And then she has also done so many other things in her life just to help local populations in countries around Africa, as well as particularly in Tanzania, which is where she initially researched her chimpanzees in the Gombe forest. And she does this kind of, I think it's called, is it Roots for Shoots, Shoots for Roots, this kind of like a youth club which teaches local children about conservation and kind of encourages them to continue education and just to educate themselves and educate others around conservation and what local populations can be doing to help. And it is just a really, really good book. She is just the most wonderful, kind, gentle person, and I just admire her so much, and I just think she's an amazing person, so I just had to put her on this list. So yeah, those are some books I recommend to existential crisis Barbie to make her feel a little bit better about the world, and that there are so many amazing people, there is so much opportunity, and also sometimes it's okay to stop and just cry a little bit and to mope around, but then always just, you know, one step forward, one day at a time. So yeah, please let me know what you guys think of these. If you guys have seen the Barbie movie, what Barbie are you? I would love to know. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.